my name's Theresa. I am part of Victory Outreach Manchester. I'm on staff here, which is a very broad term in the Christian world, but one of my main roles is a personal assistant to my pastors, and then a lot of the office administration.
Take us back to your story that brought you here to Victory Outreach, starting a bit about your childhood.
So, if I go back, I've been in Victory Outreach Manchester for 10 years now, and what brought me here was I'd had quite I'd say a difficult upbringing. I had a really amazing mum. My mum was a single mum, so from the age of 2, her and my dad, they separated, and she did an amazing job. My mum's a very strong woman. She was able to provide for us, and she supported us, and we had a very, very close relationship in my early childhood. I think one of the challenges for me came in was a lack of belonging. So my mum, when I was 9 years old, she found a new partner. They got married, and my dad, who I had contact with, but it was sort of very sporadic. It was not much consistency, I'll say. So I knew that he was there, I knew where he was, but he wasn't consistent. He'd say that he was going to turn up, and he didn't turn up. So then my mum got remarried, and then her and her partner, they then went on to have children. My dad also, where he was living, he got remarried and he had more kids. So I think it was about 13 years old, and I just felt very rejected. I felt like what was wrong with me, that I didn't fit. I didn't see the fact that I actually had 2 family groups. I felt like there was these 2 family groups and I didn't fit into either of them, which wasn't the truth, but the feelings that were there were very, very real. So one of the first ever New Year's celebrations I got to spend with my dad, it was such an exciting time for me, and I was 13, it was just before my 13th birthday, and we was at a house party, one of my stepmom's families, and being 13 and curious, I'd stolen a few drinks from the kitchen, a few martini and lemonades. And so I was drinking this drink, and I drank so many of them because it just tasted nice, and I drank so many of them that I got drunk, and I think I don't even remember midnight. I just remember being really sick and walking down this road with my dad and expecting to get really, really told off and really punished. And he sort of laughed at me, and he was like, "Oh, well, so you drink then?" He said, "Well, I suppose you must smoke. Do you want a cigarette?" And there was something in me that just was like, oh, okay, so maybe this isn't that bad. And so I think from there, it was like the enemy got a foothold in my life. So it was like all the things that I thought about drinking and smoking, it was like, oh, it's not this bad thing that we hear about. So slowly over time, other things started to creep in. And I would stay at my dad's a lot more after then. I would go and visit him at weekends because I was a teenager. My mum had said, listen, you have to make your choice. You have to make your decision. My mum had her own feelings. She kept them quite close, I have to say. She wasn't, you could tell that she was upset with some of my dad's behaviour, but she actually was never really dishonouring, which was, I mean, to me nowadays, that amazes me. So she let me make my own decision. So to me, my dad was what you'd call a functioning addict. So he had a good job, but he'd party at the weekends, take cocaine, drink. There'd always be cannabis, weed in the house. And so I found myself staying there a lot more in my early teen years. He had one of his friends that was living in the house who was a drug dealer, and I used to sneak into his room and steal cannabis. Because what had happened now in my secondary school years, that lack of belonging that I'd always felt, I started to find this sense of belonging in the wrong crowd. And because I was able to get hold of things like drugs and things that not many other people could, it was almost like that elevated me in this group. And it caused me to feel like I was something. It caused me to feel like, oh wow, okay, yeah, I'm really liked and I'm really valued, and it was really warped, and it's really strange, right? And I'm going to say this, I watched, there's a series called Top Boy, and there's something in it, and it really rang true about me and my family. And he said in it, in this group of drug dealers and these teenagers, and he said, it's my family and it's where I belong. And it made me realise how much that God will set the lonely in families, but the enemy will also set up counterfeit families. And that's what had happened. I felt like I had somewhere where I belonged and I fit in, but actually none of these people were really my friends. So it went on to that when I was like 15 years old, this one guy, he was a few years older than me at my school, he was in sixth form, and I'd been sort of dabbling in a bit of ecstasy and cocaine, and one day he said to me, well, why don't you take crack? He said it's basically cocaine, it's just harder. He said you can crush it up and you can put it in a spliff and smoke it. And I was like, oh yeah, why not? So it was really weird because it was like I lived in parallel worlds. So I'd be at home at my mum's and I used to go to dance and drama. So I'd be on my way walking to my ballet lessons, smoking a spliff with crack in it, and go into these ballet lessons completely high. And it was like I was just walking these two different journeys. And it came to a point when I got to about 16 years old that I found myself in a relationship. I think I got in this relationship with this guy because I was trying to meet that need in me of having a family, of having that sense of belonging. And at 16 years old, I just ended up at this crossroads of, right, what are you going to do with your life? You've done your exams. You're either going to go on to college and you're going to go down this road, or you're just going to throw it all away and go down this road. And I just didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel good enough. The relationship that I'd found myself in was very abusive. I'd been stealing from my parents to fund my drug habits, and my mum had asked me to move out. My dad didn't want anything to do with me, so I ended up living with this guy in his family's house. And I just found myself at a very, very low place. And I was like, okay, so this is my life. This is my life. This is what I do now, is it? And all the things that I'd seen growing up with my dad being abusive to my stepmom, I then found myself repeating those patterns. I ended up with this guy. It was a very abusive relationship, and he ended up throwing me out on the streets one night. And so I went and presented homeless. I got put in a hostel, and then for many years I bounced from hostel to hostel until I ended up in a hostel in Whitechapel in East London. And I met my daughter's dad. I have 3 kids, and at that time I was my 18th birthday, and I met this guy. I met him online.
Contact us here at Life Stories Worldwide. You can simply by emailing lifestoriesworldwide@gmail.com. or visit our website at lifestoriesworldwide.com.
This was like when online was just happening. It was MSN, Messenger, and we arranged to meet up, and we met up, and it was literally, we met at this train station, and I said, I'm still celebrating my birthday, and we went and got a bottle of Jack Daniels and started drinking, and then we ended up in, I think it was a 2-year relationship, which was just filled with chaos and drinking. And I fell pregnant with my daughter at 19 years old. And I remember having questions about, I didn't want kids. I felt like I was chaotic. I was like, could I really bring a child into this world? And then I was like, but maybe this is my chance to change. So I had my daughter, who is now 19. She's an amazing young lady. And I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to be a mum. I wanted to be a good partner. But my daughter's dad, again, the same pattern, was very abusive. And when my daughter was 6 months old, I had to leave him because I feared for myself and for my child. So I'd got my own place, I'd set up a lovely house, and I'd said, I can't do this with you anymore. And I remember he was in a very low place, and I said, you can come and stay, it's fine, and I'll look after you. You can stay for the night, have a shower, and then go on your way. And he came in, and I'll never forget it, he head-butted my wall. He got so angry, he head-butted the wall and put a dent. And I was like, that's my new house. It's like I've just tried to get my life on track. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking, and I just said, no, you know what, you need to leave. And so I was doing all right for a little bit. I was doing all right because having a baby and having a child, it plastered some of the wounds that I had for a little bit. But because I hadn't really dealt with that root cause of rejection and belonging and all of those things, it wasn't long until another relationship came in with another guy that was very abusive. He was a crack addict. He was in and out of prison. And we ended up in a very intense codependent relationship. And I thought I was going to save him because that's what I was going to do, because I was free of drugs now and I'm going to save this guy and we're going to have an amazing life. But it didn't happen like that. And he drew me into that world. So I ended up back on crack. My daughter, putting my daughter to bed at night and then going to the other end of the house, opening the window and smoking crack and praying that she didn't wake up. I then fell pregnant again, and honestly, I just didn't know what to do. I was like, I can't bring another child into this. And I remember going to the doctors and thinking, I don't know what to do. And they did a scan, and the doctor said, oh, it's twins. I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean it's twins? So I thought, you know what, okay, this is the opportunity, another opportunity to be transformed. So I had my beautiful boys. I'm relocated again to Essex, and my sons were very, very young. My daughter was 2 and the boys were babies. And I remember having both of them in my arms, and their dad, he had come back from being on a binge. I'd been clean again for, I think, 9, 12 months. Come back from being on a binge, complete psychosis, and telling me I've been here, I've been there, you've been in Walthamstow, you've been sleeping with this one, you've been doing... I'm like, I've been at home with the kids, I haven't been anywhere. But he was fully convinced in his mind. And I had these 2 kids, the babies, my sons, in my arms. And I said, listen, I've been home with the babies. And he just went crack and head-butted me. And it was my nose just split and I started bleeding all over the kids. And I was like, I can't do this. It's me. You can batter me all day long. But my kids, you could have hurt my kids. And I remember running outside, and I never called the police for anything. And I remember running out of that house and calling the police and saying, you've got to get this guy out of my house. And he was arrested. He went to prison. And unfortunately, because of that lack that I had in me that wasn't being filled, when he came out of prison, I invited him back again. I ended up in a very, very dark place. Because aside from all of the drug addiction and stuff, I had been a prolific self-harmer since the age of 14. It was a way of escape for me. And there was one night I'd been at home with the kids on my own, and then my neighbour had come round, we'd been drinking, I'd taken cocaine, and I just remember feeling like, what am I doing with my life? I've got 3 kids in bed, and I just thought, I can't live like this. And I cut my arm so badly. And I said to my neighbour, you need to look after the kids, I'm going to have to go to hospital. And I went to the hospital. And when I came home, social services had taken my kids into care. And I lost the will to fight for myself. It was like everything that I tried to make, this family, my kids, a home, being a mother, it was gone in an instant. It was gone in an instant. And I just lost the will to fight. And I just thought, you know what? I had this warped mentality of purpose, because we all have purpose. We all have a God-given purpose. But I had a warped mentality that there were also purposes in life for people to be drug addicts. And I thought maybe that's just my lot in life. I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And my partner came out of prison again and he introduced me to heroin. And I just went for 5 years, spiraled. And I was going to make the best drug addict and the best criminal you've ever seen. I would be out on the streets of East London. I used to think, I don't know who I thought I was. I would be kicking off doors of crack houses. I'd be going in there pulling grown men out. I would be setting up robberies for men to be robbed for their money and for their drugs. And I was just in chaos. But in it all, I think I put myself in that because I just wanted someone to kill me. I tried to take my own life multiple times. I even ended up in intensive care after taking a drug overdose with a machine breathing for me for 3 days. And I came round and I was like, I can't even kill myself. It's like I'm still here. And I used to fight these gangsters and just think, please, just stab me or kill me. And it was the most bizarre thing, because they'd just laugh at me. They'd just look at me and laugh. What are you doing? And I remember going in and out of prison, Holloway prison, and meeting this woman who told me that God had a purpose for my life. I said, yeah, great, good for you. Well done. No, God has a plan for your life. I said, I don't see a plan for my life. It's hopeless. My kids are gone. There's nothing there. She said, I'm telling you, God has a plan for your life. And I came out of prison and I went into her house, which was called Treasures in East London. And I started to get clean. I'd come off of methadone coming out of prison, and I was doing NA and all of the different CA, AA, all of them. If there was an A, I was at it. I was like, anything I can do. But there was still something missing.
It's very easy to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Life Stories at Lunch, to receive notifications of when we are live. Simply click the bell.
And even though I'd heard God has a purpose, God had a plan, I didn't fully believe it. I thought, yeah, that's good for you. But then I had an encounter with Jesus. And I remember just thinking, oh my gosh. And he met me where I was for who I was. And I just thought, you know what? I need to be following this guy. I've been chasing around men all of my life. I chased after my dad. I chased after all these broken relationships, and every one of them came up empty. But I suddenly became awakened to this Jesus who had actually been there in it all and had been like, I'm here, when are you coming? I'm here. And his grace and his mercy kept me alive through all of that chaos. I started going to a church. I made a decision to get baptised. And then that was where the enemy came in again. And a week before my baptism, it was like, I have no idea what happened to me spiritually, but within an instant, I was back out on the street with a crack pipe in my hand. And when I tell you it goes back worse, I was in this back alley doing things that I'm not even going to go into to get money, just to get a bit of gear. And then I went and I was searching for a drug dealer. And I saw this guy and I was like, you look like a drug dealer, stereotype of a drug dealer. I said, have you got anything? And he said, yeah, come round here. I remember going around the back of this Chinese in East London, and he tried to force himself on me, and I headbutted him. And he was like, yeah, go on, headbutt me again then if you're bad. And I did. I headbutted him again. And he just started to punch me. He punched my face. He was kicking me. He punched my face so hard it was swelled in an instant. And I had scissors that I used to carry to try and protect myself. And I took these scissors out and they dropped, and he picked them up and he stabbed me in the back of my head with my own scissors. And I was just like, and I managed to, I don't even know how I did it. I can't even remember, but I got away from this guy. And I remember in the sickness of it all, I can go and score now. Walking down the street with blood pouring out the back of my head and my face, and getting stopped by an ambulance and taken to hospital. And it was there that I was like, what am I doing? I'm about to get baptised. And God, he's so gracious. I still went and got baptised, and I've got my baptism pictures, and you can see where my face has been swollen. They had to put a metal plate in my face because the guy had punched me so hard my cheek had collapsed. And it was an interesting thing, because from that moment when I got baptised, something happened internally. Like I knew Jesus before, but now I had the Holy Spirit, because there was this uncomfortability in me for the things that I had been doing. And it was like, okay, I'm trying to live the right way, but I've always lived this way. And I was like, there was this tussle between the two things. It was like, but this is familiar. Drug taking and abuse and madness, that's familiar. But it doesn't feel good anymore. It feels weird. It's making me sick. And I was doing all right for a little bit. And then I ended up back in prison for a warrant that I'd had out for my arrest. And I just thought, oh, you know what, I might as well just take drugs. And I did, but it felt horrible. And it caused me to get really anxious, and I started to have all of these mad visions, and it made me fearful. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. And I came out of prison. It was the end of 2013. When I was in prison at the end of 2013, I used to go and get all of my health checks done. And this might trip you out, right? This might trip you out. But when I tell you that there is a scripture that says, what the enemy meant for evil, God will turn it for good. In November 2013, I sat in the doctor's surgery of HMP Holloway to be told that I was HIV positive. And you know what? The enemy thought it was going to be a death sentence. But you know, God used it as a catalyst in my life. And because I had the Holy Spirit living within me, I had a conviction that there is no way I could be the reason that someone else was sitting in a doctor's surgery being told they had HIV. I didn't know how I'd caught it. Was it a dirty needle? Was it from that fight? Who knows? But I could not. I had a conviction. I could not be the reason that someone else gets their diagnosis. And in December of 2013, I cried out to God in a very, very dark place. And I said to him, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. I'm tired. I don't like myself. I said, God, you have to transform me or kill me. and I'm not dead. I'm not dead. He brought me to an amazing ministry called Victory Outreach Manchester. New Year's Eve 2013, going into 2014, he placed me in the Victory home where he drew me so close to him. I learned how to pray. I learned how to study the Word of God. I learned how to fast. I learned spiritual disciplines. But more importantly, I built a personal relationship with Jesus. And he is my best friend. He's my best friend. And the last 10 years of walking with Jesus, they've not been easy. Times I've been really, really lonely. But in 10 years, I have never gone back to addiction. I have never touched a drug, a drink, a cigarette. In 10 years, Jesus has walked me through depression as a Christian. When I got really sick because of HIV, I got really, really sick. And I was upset with God. So you can heal me. You've done miracles. You set me free from drug addiction. Why can't you heal me of this? And it caused me to be depressed. And I questioned my faith. I questioned who my God was. And even in that questioning, he was faithful to still walk me through all of those questions, all of the unbelief I had. And he forgave me of that unbelief. And now 10 years of walking with him, he continues to do miracles, signs and wonders. He's restored my family to me. It was just in the summer of 2023 that my kids were at church with me and my sons were at the altar lifting up their hands to God. And I wasn't there to do that. God did it because he promised me that my kids would be taught by him and great would be their peace. He told me, you don't have to run back to London and go and try and save them. That's my job. And as I have walked out this walk of faith with him, he's touching and transforming my children that they never have to walk that route that I walked. I break that generational curse, that addiction that flowed from my dad down to me, and no more, no more. And that is my journey. My journey isn't just for me. My journey is generational. My journey is generational. And I thank God that I have the privilege to share this journey.